Okay, so tonight's session is, the title of it was Rivers, Mountains and Lakes in Ireland. We're going to be talking about some particular rivers, mountains and lakes. Also, we're going to be looking at one or two of the islands of Ireland. And so hopefully you're going to learn a little bit about the geography. There'll be something as well about the wildlife, particularly, you know, like in this first part of it, where I'm going to be talking about what you can see in the natural world at the moment in the winter in Ireland, what's going on, and what things can you look out for as well over the next couple of weeks and months. So even though we're into, you know, we're in the middle of the winter, it won't be long before we start seeing some signs of the spring coming back again. This flower that you can see on the right hand side is called a snowbell. And it's called the snowbell because it blooms very, very early in the spring. So sometimes the end of January, beginning of February. And it's white, so like the color of snow. But you will see it particularly in forests because it needs a lot of light to grow. And it's only at this time of the year that because the forest doesn't have any leaves, it gets enough light from the sun to be able to bloom. And then also you will get the animal that you can see in the bottom left-hand corner, the squirrel with the bushy tail. Squirrels they've been, you know, putting their acorns. So acorns are kind of small little seeds from the oak tree, right? So from el roble, as you would say in Spanish. I'm not sure of the name of it in Russian and in Japanese. Maybe you guys can tell me. But the name of the oak tree anyway, el roble, the oak tree. So the seed from the oak tree, they are put in a stash by the squirrel during the autumn. And then they use their stash for food during the winter. So sometimes if the ground is frozen, you know, it can be difficult for squirrels to get enough food. Also, there are far fewer things growing at this time of year for squirrels to eat. There are far fewer insects out there and small mammals, you know, that it might use for food. So these acorns that it has hidden away during the autumn, they're very important at the moment for them. So each year between November and January, Irish nature seems to go to sleep, I suppose, and we have winter. So it's the coldest, of course, and darkest time of the year. The days are very short, so I think the time that the sun is going down at the moment is probably about maybe 4:30 or 4:20 p.m. in Ireland. And then it doesn't get bright in the morning until, you know, it's nearly 8 a.m. After 8 a.m. before it starts getting bright. So, and then the days get even shorter. So the longest day, what's called the winter solstice, is going to be in a couple of weeks' time on the 21st of December. So that'll be the shortest day of the year. And that's also an important one for if you're going to visit one of the passage tombs in Ireland, for example, Newgrange in County Meath. I'll be talking about that. It's sort of a kind of a Stone Age calendar, if you like, that was built by people in Ireland about 4,500 BC. And on the shortest day of the year, the sun is able to shine down this passage and it lights up a special stone, which must have been sacred for the people who built it. And so the ancient people who built it, they would have been able to figure out, look, that the winter is over now, that the shortest day is here, and it would give them an idea of, you know, what time of the year it was and when to plant their crops, etc. Okay, so what kind of plants and animals do you think have the most difficult time at this time of year? So what other, like if we look at birds, for example, what ones, if you know any of the names of them, would find it hard to find food in December and January? Can anybody tell me? Well, for example, you know, the hedgehog and the bat, or even the robin. So like these creatures, the hedgehog and the bat, right? Those creatures, they hibernate. So hibernation, it's probably the same word in Spanish. I don't know about the case in Japanese and in Russian, but hibernation is when certain animals, you know, they go into a deep sleep until the end of winter. So for the hedgehog and the bat, because they're both mammals, they're both hibernating mammals, so they don't have to worry about getting food at this time of the year. Okay, whereas the robin, for example, or birds in general, birds don't hibernate. Now, some of the birds that we have in Ireland, they leave during the winter. So they go to, for example, like the swallow goes back to South Africa during the winter, or the cuckoo as well. So there's certain birds that are only seasonal. The wren as well, yeah, the wren is a bird that is very active around this time of year as well. And they find it difficult to get enough food. So if you are somebody who, you know, has a garden in Cork, you know, you might think about, I mentioned this before, but putting a bird feeder out your back, because this is the most important time for those small little birds. So particularly those birds like the robin, like the wren, but also, you know, birds like, for example, the finches, like the goldfinch and the greenfinch, you know, those kind of small songbirds, they can find it difficult to get enough food because they usually eat things like insects and nuts, and there aren't very many of them at all in the environment at all this time of year. So, you know, unfortunately, a lot of them don't make it to the end of the winter. Anyway, let us see this in a little bit more detail. So even some insects hibernate. I was surprised when I found out this, when I was doing this research, that the butterfly, it hibernates as well. So the butterfly isn't available as well for example, for birds. You know, birds might feed on the butterfly and on other flying insects. They're not available. They're not in the environment because they're all hibernating. Same with bees. And then, as I was mentioning, some birds, such as the swallow, they fly to South Africa during the winter, so they're not here in the coldest part of the year. So many of the species of birds that we have here, that you hear, for example, if you go for a walk in a woodland in the spring or summer or early autumn, you won't have this time of the year. So the robin, right, is a bird that I think everybody will know from Europe, at least. Do you have this bird in Russia? I'm sure you probably do, Angela.
I'm not sure about Russia, but I saw here in Ireland.
Okay, yeah. So this bird, the robin, because the robin is always singing this time of the year, he often gets associated with Christmas, and also because he's got a kind of a red breast or red front, right? That sort of has been linked to the blood of Jesus. And, you know, red is kind of a symbol as well of Christmas, you know, being connected with Jesus's blood. So this is one of the creatures, you know, that needs to try to find enough food at this time of the year, and it can be challenging. one of the berries which is available for the robin at this time of the year, you can see a picture of it right on the left hand side. But can anybody tell me what that plant is? I'll give you a clue, right? This plant is associated with Christmas as well. People bring it into their houses. The name in English, it sounds like, well, it's like the word for sacred in English. So can you tell me another word for sacred?
Rowan tree.
Not the rowan tree, no. The rowan tree it does look like the rowan tree, definitely. The berries are very, very similar. But the rowan tree's berries, they are normally found in kind of September, October, earlier in the autumn. You wouldn't get them this time of year. But there's a plant called the holly, Holly. So it comes from the old English word holy, right? Holly, Holly. And the holly is very unusual in that it produces seeds and fruit, or not seeds, but fruit this time of the year. Now, these little red berries that you see on the holly tree, they're edible for avians, for birds. They're poisonous for humans, so don't go out trying to eat them yourself. But it's a very useful thing that we have lots of holly trees in Ireland producing these berries in the middle of winter, because it's a very important food source for those small little woodland birds like robins and wrens and finches and things like that. And the holly as well, like I was saying before, it has been sacred for people in Christianity for a long time. People make a kind of a circular wreath of holly and then of maybe fir and spruce, and they put it on their door. That's to give good luck to people. So they're associated with Christmas now, the Christmas wreath. But that circular collection of leaves that remain green at this time of the year, having that on your door has existed long before Christianity. So things like the holly and the ivy, evergreen leaves, which are green this time of year, they have been sacred to ancient peoples living in Ireland so long before Christianity arrived. For the Celtic peoples, they also found, they thought that the ivy and mistletoe and holly, that these were sacred trees, and that's why they remain green during the winter. Now, there are other plants that are evergreen in Ireland, but many of them are not indigenous. Okay, so by indigenous, I mean that, they didn't, they're not naturally from Ireland. Like, for example, there is a plant called the rhododendron. Right, I'll show you a picture of it. Okay, now it's an evergreen tree. Okay, and the leaves are nice, but like the flowers are nice, but like it's very invasive and it takes up a lot of light and it's very fast growing. It's native to Asia. You can't see the plant, can you? Okay, sorry, I'll take a photograph of it there. Thanks, Maria Teresa, for letting me know there. Okay, sorry, I thought I was sharing my screen, but obviously I wasn't. But I think I can put it in the chat, maybe. Sure, you can, maybe one of you can share it, guys, because it's kind of awkward for me. If I get rid of this PowerPoint and show you the picture, then I won't be able to keep on showing you the presentation, and then I'll have to load it again, and it takes a while to load it. But I can just write it on the chat, and you can check it. Right? So the first thing that I mentioned is the reed, right, which is a circular kind of a thing. So if somebody can share that with us, or put it into the chat if you have the ability to do that, or I could make some of you co-hosts as well. Let me see if I can do that. Maybe, yeah, I can make, I've just made Maria Teresa co-host, just for a second. Okay, and yeah, so like Maria Teresa, if you get a chance, maybe you can find a picture of that and then show it to us. Angela, I'll also make you a co-host too, so that you can share things if you need to. And same with you, Ida, I'll make you co-host too, Anna Kane.
No, I'm already putting into the chat the picture. Maybe everyone can see on the chat.
Okay, perfect. Oh, I see it. Yeah, great. Yeah, so that kind of circular thing is the Christmas wreath. Yeah, so you like Celtic people all used to think that going through circular things would give you lots of good luck and could cure diseases. So that's where the idea of the wreath came from. And the wreath is covered with all of these evergreen trees. And then the other one that I mentioned is the rhododendron. So I'll put the name of that as well in the chat. I'm sure you probably know it because maybe you have the same problem with the rhododendron being invasive in your own country as well. It would be interesting to see if that's the case. Oh, yeah, I'm not sure if that's the case, but yeah. So anyway, that's the other one that I put down. And anyway, if I just put the names in the chat, then you'll be able to look them up yourself. But holly is the plant that produces those red berries that you can see on the screen at the moment. And then the other plants that I mentioned that are associated with Christmas, first of all, you have the mistletoe. So these were sacred to the Celtic people, so they predate Christianity. And then ivy as well. There's a hymn in Irish called The Holly and the Ivy. And ivy is representative at Christmas of the Virgin Mary, and holly is representative of Jesus. So you can see where the kind of the connection is there. So a lot of these ancient kind of Celtic practices, they were Christianized. So the ivy and the holly being sacred for the Druids, and then you had Christianity coming along, and then they remained sacred for the local people. So the early Christians kind of integrated them into the local practices. So anyway, I got into a bit of an aside there, but the holly berries are very, very important for the robin and other small birds. So many small trees lose their leaves in autumn, so they're bare in winter, and these are called deciduous trees, right, is what we call them in English. It comes from the word descent. Okay, so like the leaves descend, so they're deciduous, right? So descend is kind of come down. So they do not grow very much because there's very little sunlight and heat at this time of the year. And so the leaves obviously change color as well. and they become kind of more white, because white, of course, absorbs all of the colors in the spectrum, so that absorbs more light than it would if it's green, because, the middle part of the spectrum is reflected by green leaves. So they become white, or kind of, a lighter color to absorb more light. And then they die and they fall off. So some of the trees, as I was saying, stay green, right? So we've mentioned a couple of those, like the holly, the mistletoe, the ivy. Also, we have things like pine needles too, like pine and spruce, and like the Christmas tree, for example. So I have a Christmas tree at the moment in my house, a natural Christmas tree. So things like that as well. But many of these, the trees that are evergreen today, they are ones that aren't native to Ireland. So they weren't sacred in the old Celtic traditions. So that's why, something like the pine tree or the spruce tree, they don't really have much of an importance in traditional Irish culture. Okay. By the way, in Ireland, where have you seen trees like this? So this is supposed to be the pine tree, Scots pine. Well, if you drive around Ireland, you will see that there are lots of woodland out in the countryside with these trees. Now, all of those forests, they're owned by an organization called Quilcha, which is a state body which manages our forests. And basically, those pine trees, or Scots pine, they're produced in Ireland for commercial timber. The reason that they use that particular tree is that they grow very, very fast. They grow extremely fast, and also the wood grows very, very straight. So they're excellent for commercial sales of wood, but it's not very good for the environment or for the ecosystem, because they're not native to Ireland. So that's the Scots pine. And very few of our native birds and animals live in those Quilcha forests, because, like, it doesn't have an ecosystem to support them. It doesn't have the insects that they feed on, things like that. So the organization, anyway, is Quilcha. Now, not all of their forests are commercial timber forests. But by the way, timber is the word for wood once you cut it down from trees. Okay, so the wood that you get from trees that you sell as a product is called timber. So a lot of people are against those kind of trees, because they feel that we should use native trees instead. So a lot of people think that we should use a deciduous tree, which is also very good for timber, but it's not evergreen, right? And this is called the birch tree. So B-I-R-C-H. It also grows, as I was saying, very fast and very tall. So it's a good alternative for commercial timber to Scots pine. Also, people, they're very combustible as well. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, so they're very good for like for wood, for people's fires. They're being sold a lot at the moment for that, like in, as if people have fires at home, to use that. Also, Christmas trees like the spruce, for example, that's been grown a lot at the moment too, but it's not native either to Ireland. So most of the spruce species, they're all like ones from abroad. Okay, so these kind of environments, like they don't produce much food for Irish animals, because they're not native. So here are some plants, right, that continue to grow in the winter, right? So the holly that we were talking about a minute ago. You can see it there with the red berries. Okay, then the ivy. Remember I told you about that Christmas hymn called The Holly and the Ivy, which is, ivy is representative of the Virgin Mary, and holly because of the thorns, and the red representing the blood is representative of Jesus. But that is a Christianization of what was an earlier Celtic tradition. And then I mentioned the snowdrop as well, which starts to bloom in late January, early February. So what can you do to help animals out during the winter and also help plants out? So they may need some extra care. So for example, I mentioned, for example, about, you know, having like a bird feeder out in your garden. That can make a massive difference. Also, like if you were to plant a holly tree in your back garden, right? That's something that, you know, would really, really help robins and other small birds. So, you know, why not do something like that? Also, if you are buying a Christmas tree, please buy a Christmas tree, right? That is, let me see if I can, do you know, guys, if I can turn my camera around, maybe I can just do this. Right, can you see over there, right, my Christmas tree? Can you see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Right, so this Christmas tree is,
beautiful.
it's a living tree.
Why so
Right.
small, Rob?
Well, it's growing. It's growing. So it's a natural tree, you know, and you know, it's just much better for the environment as well. It recycles the air in your house. And right, it doesn't provide food for birds, but it's still, I think, better to have a living Christmas tree rather than why cut one down? You know, a lot of people, they have Christmas trees and then they just like get rid of it or dump it, you know, at the end of Christmas. But it's nice to have a natural one that you can put out your garden afterwards and leave it growing until next year. So I just bought it recently. That's why it's small, but you know, it's going to keep on growing, and they grow very, very fast. So in a couple of weeks' time, in Christmas Day, it'll be taller. So that's I suppose another thing that you can do to help out. And also, you know, you could, like I was saying, plant something like a holly tree out your back. That can make a big difference. But I think like having a bird feeder can really, really help as well. So guys, any questions after that first part? I'm going to share now another presentation with you. We're going to have a look at one of the islands. So just bear with me there for a second. I'm just connecting with my Google Drive. And hopefully it won't take too long to download, okay? So we're going to look at one of the islands that you can visit. Now, this particular island, it's not open until the spring. That's not got anything to do with COVID. It's like that every year, okay? Now, has anybody heard of this island before? Skellig Michael or Skellig Vihil?
Yes.
Yeah? So, what do you know about it, Maria Teresa? Can you tell us?
Yes, it was actually a monastery where the monks lived.
Exactly, yeah. And also, like, it is very important for wildlife.
Yes.
Today, right, there used to be a monastery there, but that was hundreds and hundreds of years ago. The monastery, you know, was built, I think, in the 8th century or 9th century, something like that. You will see some illustrations of the monastic settlement in a minute. But it's particularly important for wildlife because it's uninhabited. Okay, now for the puffin in particular and for the gannet. So I'm going to be talking about those two birds. I won't write down the names of them because you'll see on the presentation that I will show you. And it's an amazing place as well. It's just off the west coast of Kerry. It's about maybe 20 kilometers off the west coast of Kerry. And it's just like a rock sticking up, you know, from the Atlantic Ocean. So it's very dramatic. It's very high as well. Now, the monks, they built the staircase going up to the top of it, to where the monastery is. But when they would have arrived first, they would have had to climb, you know, and it would have been a difficult climb, a dangerous climb as well, to get to the top of it. So this was the time in early Christianity, you know, when monks and nuns were looking for the most isolated places that they could find, because they thought that these remote hermitages would they would be closer to God in these places, let's say, and it would be easier for them to pray and to meditate and to copy out the Bible and to meditate on the Word of God and things like that. So anyway, this is called Skellig Michael, or Skellig Vihil, right? And as I said, it's just off the west coast of Kerry. It's about maybe an hour to take a boat from Ballinskellig in County Kerry, right? I'll put the name of that town down in the chat. So you have to get a ferry very early in the morning to go there. It's also very dependent on the weather, because there's no natural quay there. So it can be dangerous for people getting out, and for the boat as well. The boat can be shoved against the rocks. And also there's lots of other wildlife around it in the waters. Those waters are around the southwest of Ireland, off the coast of Kerry and Cork. They're full with mammals. They have more mammals now than they've ever had in the last kind of couple of 100 years. The reason being, right, now we hear a lot of kind of sad stories about animals dying out and animals in danger of extinction, but the situation with Irish seas is the opposite. Numbers of humpback whales, for example, and blue whales are increasing. Numbers of sharks in Irish waters are increasing. Also, numbers of killer whales, of pilot whales, of dolphin, of porpoises, of walruses. They're all increasing. The reason being, can you guess why? It's got something to do with the EU. Ballinskellig, yeah. Shall I tell you? Well, it's because of the fishery quotas. So there are very stringent fishery quotas that have been put into place by the EU. So there's only a certain number of fish that fishermen can catch. And those figures, the quotas in Ireland, are very small. So there's loads of fish in Irish waters now, more than there ever was before. So there's plenty of food for big mammals like humpback whales and sharks, and, well, the shark isn't a mammal, but for dolphins and things like that. So it's very important for that as well. And also the island appeared in the Star Wars films, so it became famous for that as well. Okay, let me scroll down now here. Okay. So here you can see where Skellig Vihil or Skellig Michael is, right? So it's way off in the Atlantic Ocean, out in the middle of nowhere. It's a very dramatic kind of location. Right, so I was saying 20 kilometers, so 10 kilometers off the Ivera Peninsula. So that's the peninsula with Ballinskellig. So Ballinskellig is up there by the island at the top of the Ivera Peninsula is the one in the middle in County Kerry. Okay, so you have going up from Cork, you have Sheep's Head, then Beara, right, the Ring of Beara, then what's called the Ring of Kerry or the Ivera Peninsula, and then the Dingle Peninsula is the one in North Kerry. Okay. Okay, so what will you find on Skellig Vihil? So here's a picture of the monastery. These are called beehive huts. Now, when the monks went there in the 6th century, so the 6th century AD, the early period of Christianity in Ireland, there was nothing there. You know, there weren't any trees there. There was very few or very little kind of natural materials that they could use there for building. The only thing that they had there was stone. So they couldn't, there wasn't any wood from trees that they could use to build their roofs. So that's why they use this kind of beehive shape, right? So it's called the beehive hut, right? Because it's similar to the way that bees would build their hive, you know, using the same technique. So they're completely waterproof. There's no cement in them. They're completely made out of stone. And the stone has to be very carefully selected so that they fit very tight in together. Because, you know, imagine making that waterproof, you know, so it's completely waterproof inside. And these were, some of them were very big. You know, they could be used as kind of a common room or a church by the monks. Other ones are very small, and we call them oratories. So oratory from orare in Latin, or same verb in Spanish, isn't it, for the word to pray. So oratory. So they're single little beehive huts. So sometimes monks would spend some time meditating on their own in some of the smaller ones as well. But this is where they lived in, it's where they cooked in, it's where they, you know, they spent their whole lives in these little beehive huts. The other island, there are 2 Skellig islands. The other one is called Skellig Viog, or Little Skellig, and that has never been inhabited. Now, as I said, the monastery is empty now. It was abandoned in the late Middle Ages, I think something around the 11th century, 12th century, something like that. So I mentioned the staircase that's going up to the top of the island. So this is the staircase here. So this was built by the monks to make it easier for them to access the monastery. And, you know, as it got bigger, you know, for bringing up food and water and things like that. Okay, maybe they could have got a certain amount of water from rain up on top in the monastery area, but as the monastery maybe grew, they might have needed to get water from the mainland. And then here's another picture of it, and you can see it's very dangerous, you know, coming down, because there isn't any railing on the side, and it's extremely steep. You don't get a sense in the picture of how steep it is, but it's actually kind of frightening when particularly when you're walking down it, because you feel like you can fall off, and, you know, there's a massive kind of drop of a couple of 100 meters, you know, down into the sea. Another thing as well that you notice is just the sound of the birds, the sound of the gannets screeching. It's kind of very haunting. It's kind of a little bit scary when you arrive there. Anyway, at the port, so it does say port, but it's the tiniest port. So if the water is anyway rough, if the sea is anyway rough, then you can't land there. Now, so it's got 600 steps, although I was told that it had 1,000 when I went there. Now, it costs, right, from Ballinskellig to go there. It's expensive to go there because you have to buy a ticket from the OPW, the Office of Public Works. And then you have to get a boat out there as well. And you have to pay for a guide too. You're not allowed to go there on your own because of it being a wildlife sanctuary. So most public parks or natural parks in Ireland are free. This particular one is quite expensive. So usually they sell the trip. If you want to land on the island and visit the monastery, and then get the full sort of tour, that cost me 75 euros. So it's quite pricey. So it's not something you would do every day. And that's only for a day trip as well, you know. But it is worth doing, even though it's expensive. It's worth doing at least once in your life, because it's just absolutely spectacular. So the monks would come down as well and catch fish, for example, or get supplies as well from the mainland, probably. So the monastery is surrounded by an outer wall. This wall was used for defense against attack. Now, there was a Viking raid that was recorded at the site in 823. So, you know, the steps, the staircase, when they put them there, it was good in one way, in order they could easily get supplies up and down, but also made them more vulnerable to Viking attack. So then they had to build a wall. Inside the monastery, the monks lived in these small beehives. See that word, beehive-shaped stone huts or houses called clochons. Okay, so clochons is from the word for stone in Irish. One or two monks would have lived in each one, and some of them would have been for living in, others would have been for praying in exclusively. It's thought that no more than 12 monks lived on Skellig Vihil or Skellig Michael at any one time. Inside the monastery, there are also two oratories. So I was talking about the oratories, where the monks would go and pray each day. And there's also a number of stone crosses there too. And a stone church was even built there in the 11th century, so in the 1000s. So life must have been extremely challenging to live there. The weather, particularly in the winter, would have been extremely difficult to put up with. And there would have been very little shelter for the monks. Where they were, you know, you're completely exposed to the force of the wind. It would have been very, very difficult keeping warm and starting fires and things like that. And if there were storms, you know, that would have made life very, very difficult. So as I was saying earlier, the monks chose this island as they felt that they could fully dedicate their life to God in isolation from the outside world. And their diet would have been limited. So the land is very rocky, so you couldn't grow anything there. So their diet would have mainly consisted of the meat and eggs that they would have got from birds living there. So from the gannets and the puffins, for example, and also fish that they went down and managed to catch. So fresh water was collected by the monks in stone cisterns, but if there were 12 monks living there, they would have needed maybe a little bit more water from time to time. So I mentioned about the nature on Skellig Vihil. So this is the puffin here. It's a beautiful looking animal. It looks very exotic with its multicolored beak. It doesn't look like how you would imagine an Irish bird. They never come inland, and they're totally unafraid of humans. So they have no natural fear of humans like many of the birds that live on the mainland of Ireland do. So you can go right up to a puffin, like within a couple of centimeters of a puffin. They're not frightened of human beings. They won't fly away. They just ignore you. So you can get some amazing close-up pictures of them. They only come in April, so they only stay for the summer months. They come to breathe, right, to bring up their young. So they feed their young chicks there until the young chicks are big enough to be able to fly themselves. If the chicks cannot fly before the start of the autumn, then the chicks will die, unfortunately. So some of them don't get big enough and don't get strong enough. And when they try to fly, they don't. And they end up drowning or getting eaten by some predators. And then if the young chicks are big enough and strong enough, they're able to fly, and they migrate to Canada for the cold winters with their parents, with the rest of the flock. So loads and loads of bird watchers travel to Skellig Vihil because it's probably one of the biggest puffin colonies in the world. I mentioned about the gannets as well. So I'll put the word for gannet in the chat. So the gannet is another bird that you get on that island as well. But particularly on the other Skellig island. So Skellig Michael attracts loads of tourists every year. In fact, the booking is usually gone, so it's impossible to book it until you know, like you'd have to book it like sometimes a year ahead or even a year and a half ahead. But what happens is sometimes you get cancellations. So like I still recommend you go down there, and then you can just go to Skelligs early in the morning at about 8 a.m. And I recommend, you know, going down there on a Friday. And then Saturday morning, like if you're going down there for a weekend, Saturday morning, go to the quay in Skelligs and speak to the boatmen and ask them, you know, oh, if you have any cancellations today, let me know and I will go. So that's how I managed to get there when I went. And remember that the weather has to be calm for the boat to be able to drop people off. Alternatively, guys, you can pay 25 euros and you can get a tour around. So it doesn't stop and leave you off in the islands, but there are loads of tickets for that. So there's no restriction as to how many people can go on the tour that goes around the islands, seeing the wildlife. And that's still definitely worth doing as well. So I mentioned that The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi were filmed there. You can also get a virtual tour of Skellig Vihil using this link here. So I'm going to try to share this link or copy the link with you. Then I'll give you a minute to go and take a look at the link. And while you're doing that, I can just take a little break and have some water. Okay, so we'll take maybe 5 minutes to do that. Okay, so go and explore that link there, Voices from the Dawn. It's quite a nice little thing. Hopefully the link will work for all of you. It takes a little bit of time to load as well. And I think you need to have your computer or your device would need not to be too yeah, sorry?
It's work. That's fine.
Yeah, it's working. Yeah. Yeah. It's working for me now as well. Yeah. So you can see you can go around to different parts of the island, and then you click on the kind of red circular things and they will take you, you know, to each of the different places. Okay, so I'll give you a couple of minutes anyway to explore that. Okay, and we'll have just maybe a 2-minute break then while you're doing that.
Rob, we don't hear you.
Whoops, thanks for telling me there. All right, so yeah, we're going to talk about one of the rivers now, our most famous river, our longest river, the River Shannon. So it's over 360 kilometers long. You can see here that it starts right in Limerick. Okay, so Limerick City is on the Shannon, and then it continues up right through the centre of the country up into County Leitrim. The river is named after Shannon, a Celtic goddess. So legend has it that Cata, a river monster, lived in the river as well. So the River Shannon, it rises in the Shannon Pot in the Coolca Mountains in County Cavan. And it flows in a southwardly fashion through 11 different counties. So Cavan, Leitrim, Roscommon, Longford, Westmeath, Galway, Offaly, Tipperary, Clare, Limerick, and then Kerry as well. It acts as a natural divide between the east and the west of Ireland. So it's always been militarily very important, right? So the British were always trying to, control the Shannon because it meant that they could divide the country up into two if they had possession of the Shannon. So there are 3 lakes as well on the Shannon. There's Loch Allen, which is the one furthest north, Loch Ray in the middle, and then Loch Derrick down in near to County Limerick. There are also lots of smaller tributaries as well. So rivers that, smaller rivers that flow into the Shannon. So you have the Suck, the Inny, and the Brosna River. And then the Shannon estuary is where the Shannon flows into the Atlantic Ocean, right? So that's by Limerick and between Limerick and Clare. Okay, so that kind of patch of land in here. Okay, so this as well is a very important area for wildlife. Okay, because it's got a lot of kind of mud flats. So it's important for birds. Also, there are lots of bottlenose dolphins in the Shannon estuary as well. So the estuary defines the boundary between Kerry and Limerick, and also it defines the boundary up to County Clare in the north. And the estuary is very long as well. It's nearly 100 kilometers long. So estuary is basically a tidal part of the river. Okay, so the Lee has one of those as well. So it's where the river has tides, and usually the water is a mixture of fresh water and sea water in the same way that it is in the Lee estuary too, in Cork Harbour. Okay, so it's important for tourism as well. It's very accessible because you can go there by using the Shannon Airport, for example. There's a railway station in Limerick. It's also easy to drive up there from Cork. There's a good road going up there if you're either going to Shannon Airport or you're going to Limerick, so it's easily accessible. Every year people flock to the Shannon for fishing, for sailing, for water sports. There's also lots of historical sites on the banks of the Shannon. For example, Clon Vic Nois or Clon MacNois, which was probably the biggest early Christian city, if you like. It started as a monastery, but really it acted as a city, and you can visit it today. It's no longer in operation as a monastery, but it does, the buildings still stand, and it's got some incredible high Celtic crosses as well. Okay, so we're going to do this in a moment, right? So just leave that there for 1 second, okay? And then I'm going to give you a map of Ireland, okay? So I'm going to share the screen once again. Right, so I'm going back into Google Drive here. Okay, so guys, let's see how much you know about Irish geography. Okay, now you can get help from one another in order to do this. Right, hopefully it will still share this because it's not actually a PowerPoint. Oh, okay. Yeah, so guys, basically this is it here, right? I want you to see how many of the rivers you can label. Okay, so you can use Google Maps as well to help you, but maybe if you start off by trying to do the ones just in Munster. And the ones associated with the Shannon.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I might give you a link to that document itself as well, because you can see the answers there too. So just give me 1 moment there and I'll put it back in the screen. Seem to want to leave me share it. Yeah, I can just send it to you maybe as a picture.
Ah, Boyne, the River Boyne. Hmm. Hmm.
Wow, Maria Teresa, you're doing fantastically. Here is the key to it. Okay, so obviously there's a lot of them there, so you're not going to know very many of them, but you might know the parts of the Shannon. So we spoke about the parts that are tributaries to the Shannon, for example, the Inny and the Suck. Then you have in Galway, there is the Clare River. Now, when it goes through Galway City, it's called the Corrib. right? So it's got a different name in Galway City, but it's the same river. Then just looking at the ones in Cork as well. So you have the Lee that goes through Cork City. Maybe ones that you won't know about as well is the Blackwater. So the Blackwater goes through, for example, the towns of Youghal, right? So it goes into the sea at Youghal. And also you have Fermoy and Mallow on Blackwater. And then the River Lee, it starts in Gugon Barra, which is a beautiful lake up in the mountains, the Derry Nasogart Mountains. And then the town of Bandon, well, Bandon got its name from the river. So the river is the Bandon as well. And the Bandon River comes out at Kinsale. Yeah, and then the other ones that are kind of well known are, first of all, the Boyne, right, where you get Newgrange. We're going to be talking about Newgrange in a moment. And the River Liffey that goes up through Dublin city centre. The other ones are probably new to you, but anyway, you've got them all here in this document. Okay, so I'll stop sharing that. And I'm going to do another presentation now. Okay, so guys, this time we're going to talk about the Burren. Right, so the Burren is a natural geographical limestone pavemented area which covers County Clare in the southwest of Ireland, so it's in County Munster, and also the Aran Islands. Then afterwards I'm going to be talking about the Aran Islands. So, all right, let me just get the presentation up here for me. 1 second. Okay, so shouldn't take, you should see it up on the screen now. The Burren appearing. Burren presentation appearing. Okay, yeah, so the Burren. So what is the Burren anyway? Just wait for this part to download. Okay, so Burren means Great Rock in Irish, right? So it's a region in County Clare, which is very, very important for its unique geography and ecosystem. So the soil there is very, very bad. It's basically, you know, looks like the moon. So this sort of surface where the rock is being shown, right? The bedrock, natural bedrock is being shown, is very unique in Ireland, all right? So the rock that you have is limestone, and it's called limestone pavement. So these limestone formations, you get another idea of what it looked like. So it's like the kind of surface of Mars or something like that. So the Burren is the best example of what's called by geographers a karst landscape in Ireland, with unusual landforms and underground drainage systems. Limestone is a very pervious rock, so it dissolves in water very easily. So whenever you have limestone rock as the bedrock in an area, you have lots of underground rivers. And for example, the limestone area in the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico is full of what they call cenotes, which are blowholes or water holes. So we have lots of caves as well here. Alawi caves are probably the most famous caves that you can visit in the Burren area. So it's not a hard rock. So water cuts channels through it on the surface, but also these channels create gaps on the flat surface of the rocks of limestone, so the slabs of limestone. So they create kind of like, you know, a grid shape, right, of gaps on the limestone. So that's why we call it limestone pavements, right, because it almost looks like it's been made by human hands. So there are lots of rivers as well that flow underground in the Burren. and there are many caves as well. So I was talking about the caves just a moment ago. So the limestone caves form when acidic groundwater seeps through limestone rocks, dissolving holes in the rock. And then the water carries the dissolved calcite. So calcite is also called lime. So lime is made up of calcium, right? So calcite is the adjective of that. So it dissolves the calcite away and it deposits it in various kind of limestone formations. So such as stalactites from the ceiling. So they're like icicle type formations that hang from the ceiling in limestone caves. And then you have stalagmites coming up from the ground. Sometimes the stalagmites and the stalactites, they meet and they form a natural pillar. Okay, this is a way that you can remember it, that stalactites are from the ceiling and stalagmite are from the ground with the G and the C in the spelling. Okay. Also the flora and fauna in the Burren, as I was saying earlier, the ecosystem is very unique. So you have lots of like plants in the Burren that you won't find elsewhere in the country. So the great landscape of the Burren does not give a hint at the incredibly unique flora and fauna that thrive in their own unique ecosystem. Alpine Arctic plants live beside Mediterranean plants in the Burren. So you get a mixture of different kind of microclimates in the Burren. Plants that love limestone soils and acidic soils grow in the Burren, as well as plants that are usually found in woodland habitats. Of all the different plant species found in Ireland, about 75% of them are found in the Burren. Now, in the Burren and also in the Aran Islands, right? Because it's the same limestone formation, let's say. Okay. So how do the Arctic alpine plants survive in the Burren? Well, the sunlight is reflected off the grey limestone pavement. This is necessary for the Arctic alpine plants, as without sunlight, these organisms are not able to produce enough food. So the reflection of the light from the kind of almost white limestone means that they get more sunlight than they would if it was black soil, for example, which absorbs all of the sunlight that it gets. So the Mediterranean plants, how do they manage to survive there alongside the Arctic alpine ones? Well, the sun's heat is absorbed into the limestone and it's released, this heat is released during the winter. Also the Gulf Stream, which means that Irish ports don't freeze during the winter. That brings warm, moist air over from the Mexican Gulf. So that comes to the west coast of Ireland. So this is very important, that warmth that the sea brings in, that the ocean brings in. It's very important for those Mediterranean plants that grow in the Burren. Also, there's a huge variety of different animals in the Burren. So you have, for example, hares, voles, they're small mammals. Foxes, shrews. Shrews are tiny little mammals as well. Pine martens, which look like domestic cats. In Irish, we call the pine marten an cat crean. So here is a pine marten here. Okay, so they look kind of like cats. So the Irish version, cat crean, means the cat of the trees. You have wild goats and bats as well here. Many different kinds of birds as well. So smaller birds that you would get like in woodlands and, you know, garden birds like finches and blue tits, to larger birds which are more unusual in the rest of the country. For example, hen harriers, they're quite uncommon. That's the one. That's the hen harrier here. So, and also kestrels. So kestrels are becoming increasingly common in the cities, but in urban areas and cities, but that's only a recent thing. but kestrels have been living in the Burren for a long time, and their numbers have been very large in the Burren. So there's also one other creature that wasn't named here, guys, which is Ireland is famous for not having snakes because St. Patrick, according to legend, drove the snakes out of Ireland. But we do have other reptiles. So we do have the common lizard. And the common lizard exists in Ireland, but only in the Burren. There's also another relative of the common lizard, which is a lizard without any legs, okay, but it's still part of the lizard family. But it looks exactly like a snake, and they exist only in the Burren as well. So it's a legless lizard, if you like. There are also lots of Stone Age dolmens. So a dolmen is this kind of burial site from the Neolithic period between, so it was built between 4200 BC and 2900 BC. So there's one very, very famous one in the Burren as well. It's very important for tourism, and it's got lots of waymarked scenic walks in the area. There's many visitor centers, for example, in Ennis and in the other smaller towns in the Burren. You also have the cliffs of Moher as well, that are on the coast of the Burren, right? So it's the same kind of, they're limestone cliffs. So it's the same kind of formation. So you can visit the cliffs of Moher as you're visiting the Burren. And because of the very unusual flora and fauna, a lot of tourists come to the Burren, especially for that, in the spring to see the flowers and things like that. Okay, so that's the Burren. Any questions about that? Would anybody like to visit the Burren? This, yeah. So I recommended, like, the lockdown has ended now, so why not take advantage of it? If you get sick of Christmas shopping, you know, it's a great thing to go and do now. And I would say because of the time of the year, there won't, like usually Irish people, we visit our families during Christmas. So like if you're looking for something to do, you know, around Christmas, and if you're in Ireland, I recommend highly going to the Burren and to the Cliffs of Moher. I think you'd have a brilliant time. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the Aran Islands. Right, so I'm talking about the Aran Islands together with the Burren because the flora and fauna on the Aran Islands are very similar to the ones that you have in the Burren, and it's the same landscape. It's the same kind of limestone pavement that you get on the Burren. So it's the part of the same kind of strata of limestone. So the Aran Islands and the Burren, during the last ice age, they were connected by land together. But now, you know, when the ice age ended and the level of the sea got higher, then the area between the Aran Islands and the Burren became flooded. But originally it was all part of the same structure. So these were kind of originally uplands in the western part of the Burren area. You can see how close they are, right, to the Burren. So the Aran Islands are located off the west coast of Ireland, in Galway Bay, right, so just off County Clare, just off the Burren. So you can see, look, the landscape is very similar to that of the Burren. The location is beautiful, and they also have cliffs that are very similar to the Cliffs of Moher. So the scenery is absolutely breathtaking. So the three islands, right, the biggest one is called Inishmore. Then you have the middle one, Inishmine, or Middle Island, it means. So Inishmore is Big Island, Inishman is Middle Island, and Inishir is the eastern island, right? So Inisheer is the smallest of the 3 islands. Now, all of the islands are inhabited. So you can see here the cliffs, right, on the western side of Inishmore. So these cliffs are not as famous maybe as the cliffs of Moher, but they are just as high and just as spectacularly beautiful. So that's one of the main attractions, you know, to go and to see the cliffs. Also, you don't kind of expect to see these cliffs. There's no hint from the landscape that suddenly you're going to get the cliffs. And the other side of the island, so the side that faces Galway, is flat and there are lots of beaches. So the island is like a ramp, and it kind of goes up and up and up until it meets the cliffs and then drops down suddenly into the Atlantic Ocean. The population of the island is approximately 900 and it's 31 square kilometers. Then you have Inishmaan, which is much smaller, only 9 square kilometers, and there's 160 people living here. Inisheer is a little bit bigger with 250, and that's about twice the size of Inishmaan. The language of the Aran Islands today is Irish. So it's a Gaeltacht area, an official Gaeltacht. So Gaelga or Irish is the first language of all of the people from the Aran Islands. So students come from all over Ireland to attend summer courses there to improve their Irish. Getting there are a few different options. There is an airport on Inishmore. So you can fly with Aran Islands from Galway, from Connemara Airport or from Galway City Airport to the Aran Islands. The flight is about €50. I went there in the summer. So I didn't fly though, I took the ferry, and the ferry costs, I think, maybe €20 or something like that. And they've just bought a brand new ferry as well, which has just gone into operation. So it's a big kind of new one with lots of space on it. Easy, one that's very easy to do social distancing on it. So here's some snaps of it. You can see that all of the walls have been built out of the limestone, right? And they didn't use any cement either. And there are lots of castles as well on the islands. And there's an ancient prehistoric fort as well called Dún Éingisa. You have lots of seals in the waters around the island too, as well as dolphins and whales. And it's an excellent place for doing water sports as well, if you're into like kite surfing or water boarding or anything like that. So these places of interest, right, in the islands below, right, I want you to take a look at them on the internet, right, and see which one do you think would be the most interesting for you if you went to visit yourself. Okay, so I might assign one place to each person. So Maria Teresa, can you take Dún Éingis, the first one? Okay, so can you research that and tell us what it is?
Okay, okay.
And then, so Angela, if you can do Paul na Pesht, or the wormhole, and tell us about that. Tell us about the competition that happens there every year as well. Then Akane, if you could look at the third thing, Plassey Wreck, right? It's a shipwreck. Okay. So can you tell us about that? And then Singe's chair. So Ida, could you do that one? Okay, and I'll do O'Brien's Castle. Right, so just take a minute to look it up on Wikipedia, your place, and then when we come back, you can just tell us one or two sentences about your place.
Okay.